So, and actually we're going to talk about this, okay? Setting the actual trigger. All right. Now, believe it or not, in the real world, if you get people into peak states, sometimes they kind of freak out.
Yes, when you're, and this is another point, we're trying to kind of talk about NLP and how things are done there, as opposed to how we use it for persuasion, since it's what you're familiar with. And we've actually seen this in interactions. In the therapy room, again, they're participating. People are expecting you to do something a little different. If they were expecting it to be the same as everyday interactions, they wouldn't be coming to you, right? So when we're out talking to people, we've seen people push people into these peak states where they feel really excited. Yeah. What? What happened?
I know, nothing.
Okay.
It just made me twitch.
Where they feel really excited. And the person goes along, and they're enjoying it, but then they disappear. And why is that? Because of what we mentioned earlier. It feels unnatural. It feels weird. It's too much for someone you're talking to. And it's ineffective.
And by the way, again, it's not invisible. It's, people notice that. You know, I can't go, you know what you like in a car and you know how you feel, okay? Now, if you double that feeling and double it again,
and believe me, we've done that in rooms. It's fun, and it's fun to do.
You know, and people go, "What do you mean?" And it's like you don't want to pop them out to the logical part of the brain where they start asking questions.
Right.
All right. So
of what you're doing, yeah.
All right. So there's two things to think about here. So you guys are familiar with this. Oops. You're familiar with the flow of a state.
Right.
And in NLP, we try to get somebody up to the peak state because we want to do something with that to help them change a behavior.
Right.
Okay. In persuasion, we want to anchor way down here. All right. Right down in this area. All right. Why is that important? Okay, so it's
for a couple reasons.
Number one, the state here has a lot of movement to it. When you go from where you are to feeling the next state, there's this shunk. That's the only word I can come. It has movement.
Doesn't
it has
translate.
Acceleration.
Yeah.
Okay, right in this area, it takes off. All right. Now, in that moment, we have two things that are necessary for a really good anchor in everyday life. All right. We have novelty because they've gone from where they are to a different state. And we have the emotion.
Right.
When you can combine novelty and emotion, all right, and set a trigger, boom, you have
an instant anchor.
Instant learning.
And and that has been shown. It forms a neural pathway instantly if you have novelty and emotion.
And if you're going to look it up for brain geek stuff, basically right in this area, your brain gets a boost of acetylcholine. All right. Big word, just means brain juice.
Yeah.
All right. And that's acetylcholine is also, by the way, the same thing that makes a really great phobia.
True. Okay. And it forms an instant neural pathway, which lasts forever. You can use these anchors years later, and they'll still be effective.
So your brain automatically learns this feeling and associates it to the trigger, which is what we'll get to next. Now, the important part about this and why this is really important is
it's invisible.
It is invisible. Why? All right. So let's just say this is people's emotions, and that's the normal. This is up. Okay.
Normal range is between these two lines.
Yeah.
In the normal day, people have a range of emotions and high emotions.
People exist in here.
Right.
All right. Okay. If you
go to peak state.
Go to a peak state. It goes out here, and in ordinary everyday life.
That's weird.
It's weird. It sets off an alarm.
Right.
Okay. It's like, wait a minute, this is unusual.
I should run.
You actually get people who say, this feels too good, there must be something wrong. Okay. Or later on down in the process, they do something, but then when they get home and the emotion settles back down, they rethink the entire thing and change their mind.
Right.
Okay. That's why hitting the emotion right in the acceleration is still perfectly, all right.
It's very effective and invisible.
It's inside that peak. It's way down here, and you don't want to push them up too high.
Right.
You want to catch it on the upswing.
It makes it a lot faster, easier.
In the real world, it makes it so much easier. Okay. All right. So Now we've got step one,
Right.
Elicit the state.
Right.
Okay, empty bucket elicitations. We have a list of them. If you ask on our Facebook group, I'll give you a list of them.
Setting trigger.
Set or blah, blah, blah.
How we
Setting the when
the
to set
emotional
trigger.
range when we set the trigger, and now we want to talk about how we set the trigger. What
Yeah.
anchors we use.
Now, so,
Right?
Yeah.
So, okay. So there are a couple things. First of all, we never touch anybody. Be clear about that, because we don't need to, and it has limitations, as we talked about earlier. So, for us, we use something that's subtle. What you don't want it to do is look weird. You don't want to go, how, and now, and be very outside of your normal range of motion. Because if I'm sitting and talking like this, and I'm very subtle, and then I want to set an anchor and go, with me, or do this, it looks weird, right? And it takes their attention away, and it breaks rapport. And when you're out of rapport, you know you don't get as good of effects, good of results, right? So how we set triggers is we actually look at the person's normal movements. Okay, we look at the way the person naturally moves. We do this in our trainings. We'll have people watch the other person talk and talk about something good and something negative, and we'll watch for things such as head tilts, hand movements, body movements, and we'll set their anchors to the way they naturally move. So one, it's very subtle and people don't catch it. And two, it's really easy for you to move the way you naturally move and not have to go outside of the norm. And you can learn it that much faster. So Tom uses hand movements. Right, left, move away. And for him, that's very natural. When we team anchor, I use hand movements to match him.
Yeah.
I use head tilts. For me, that's very natural and just as effective. Now, an
Head tilt.
which
It's very subtle.
my good head, it's just a little head tilt to the right, to the left. I have guilt and love Kim, and that's what I used to anchor people to. I don't do it anymore, but I used to always anchor people to and people. And the funny thing is, actually, quick story: 2 guys who had been to seminars separately were sitting together in New Zealand. And we came on film, and I walked on. They both went, "Oh, Kim!" And then they looked at each other like, "Oh my God, she has me anchored."
She was anchored.
It was fantastic. So they still are good friends with us.
Yeah.
So we have all these head tilt anchors, and
So it
that distracted
really
me.
just
Yeah.
it has to match
How
your
you move, yeah.
natural gestures.
Right.
For me, setting an anchor, flipping my hand out, very, very
Right.
natural. Okay. Some people are a little lower. Now, here's the thing that's really interesting about the anchor. It does not have to be as obvious as you think it is. It's not a big,
shouldn't be
"Here's my
obvious."
anchor, here's my anchor. Here's my anchor.
If someone's doing it well, you shouldn't see it. You should, even if you're trained, you should be looking at them and thinking, "Are they trying to anchor me?" Because if one of my students is doing this very well, I have to watch and think about it to catch them.
Oh yeah.
Okay, and that's when
The
I
ultimate
know
compliment, really.
it is. That's when I know I've done a really good job of teaching them. So, and the other thing is that we've noticed we generally do good, bad, unimportant. Those are our major anchors because you can keep track. You can always use the same anchor for everybody, the same movement. But one thing we've really noticed is with everybody, when they have good feelings, there's a lot more bounce and movement to it. The movement is softer. The anchor is always a little bit softer. Like it's not a hard chop. The bad feelings, people are always a little more stiff, and it's more of a curt kind of harsh movement, whether it's a hand or a head tilt. And that's across the board.
Yeah, it's really interesting. So, like she said, we only have 3 places that we trigger anything. Okay, I mean, we just have, and for me, it's right and left.
Right.
All right, so,
And for ease with working together, we both use right, left, and we can team anchor. He can use head tilts, I can use hand movements, but that's again another thing.
So we'll have, good and bad. Okay, these are my 2 buckets. All right, I'm going to anchor somebody. All good feelings, no matter what they are,
Right.
go into the good anchor. Okay, so are you having a nice day? Oh, the day is great. Boom, anchor it, put it in the bucket. All right. What do you like about the car? Oh, it's just got, the greatest windshield wipers. They're amazing. Boom. Okay, goes in the car. A little weird, but
Yeah.
that's okay. Oh, this coffee is great. Everything goes in the good bucket.
Right.
It doesn't matter. It have nothing at all to
You just
do
touched
with what
on
you're doing.
yes, that's the important point you touched on.
Thank
You can
you.
set
That's
the
my job.
anchor before you even start selling, unrelated to what you're selling. It just has to feel good.
Yeah.
So.
Got to have that good anchor. Bad anchor. What, tell me about my other car is doing this, is doing that. Bad anchor, bad anchor, bad anchor. There's no useless anchor. You can have either one.
It can
if
be.
somebody tells you,
Yeah. It can be, sorry I'm late, my kids were rotten today.
I
Set
hate
that
the
anchor.
weather, bad anchor. Okay. I hate,
Tom, let me just because it's the way you decide on that excitement anchor. Do they based on your experience? Do they always put that kind of anchor the same? Different variety of examples, but similar states. Do they really, like in the physiological, maybe the tone of voice, do they mostly exactly the same anchor all the time?
What do you mean?
For instance, that they can tell something about the coffee and then the car.
Yeah.
Do you force to be in the empty, in the bucket anchor, or do sometimes they put it there?
See, that's a very good question.
Oh.
Okay, that's a very good question.
You mean, do you steal other people's anchors?
Well, we
Or-
can get to that, but generally, and here's the thing that's really cool. People will put things where you tell them.
Yes.
All right. If I set an anchor here, okay, that's where it's going to be. I don't.
You don't have to use someone else's anchor, what they
No.
naturally do. You can, right?
Yeah, just momentarily, but you
Right,
always
and
want
then
to move it into
you
your
transfer it to your bucket, because here's the thing. If I'm in sales and I'm building relationships, if I do anything in relationships and everybody has a different anchor. One person goes like this and one person leans back. I can't remember all of that. And this is a long-term thing. We always think long-term in what we do. We talk about building relationships. So I want all my anchors for everybody right here and right here, or one head tilt and the other head tilt. So
Yeah.
I can always remember where they are, use them naturally, and make them a normal part of how I speak to people.
Yeah, you got to remember, it all goes back to brain juice. All right. That acceleration and the acetylcholine's generated, and I make this gesture, and it's a distinct gesture. It's like different than everything else I do. So just waving my hands won't fire it. I have to fire
Right.
the anchor. All right. So that creates an association between brain juice, feels good. Tom makes this gesture. This means
Right.
feel good. Okay.
And one reason, we used to do a lot of that, stealing anchors. We still teach it, but then we teach transferring it to your anchor. And one reason we changed the way we did things and simplified it to make it, and keeping it effective, we had to simplify it and keep it effective. Because if you're teaching people, as I'm sure some of you have found, if it's too complicated, they never use it. And what we wanted to make sure is we could streamline something and make it very powerful still, so people would go out and use it.
Right.
That's how we've kept clients 10, 15, 20 years even.
Oh yeah.
And they're very effective. So those were our two focuses on building what we do.
If you think about it, if you do it this way, all right, and associate, get the elicitation, look for acceleration, set the anchor. It doesn't matter whether you're talking to one person or 1,000 people.
Right.
They are all anchored to that one feeling.
Right.
You'll never understand 1,000 people's anchor. It's not possible.
You can have everybody on this chat anchored to the same trigger. It doesn't matter when you anchored them, how you anchored them. You can use it on film. You can even anchor them without seeing them. But everybody's the same anchor, so if you want them to take an action, then you can use the same anchor, use that action.
Yeah. So that's why look, I used to have, I would make an anchor map, and my anchor map was beautiful. I had like trance, this, relaxation, confusion, boom. Had all these like 5 or 6, 10, 15 different buttons.
And we taught it. Nobody used it.
Okay.
They thought it was
Yeah.
beautiful. They never used it.
It was like the best thing that nobody ever used in our
Yeah.
lives. It was a beautiful failure. Okay.
And we've gone through that process with everything we teach, figuring out what people will do and people won't do.
Yeah.
And creating our product so people can run with it.
Yeah. Think about it. If you simplify things down to this level, it becomes usable immediately. You don't have to sit there and practice. It's just boring to practice that much. All right. So what we would have, the three anchors is
Right.
be
Mostly
like
good and bad.
good, bad, and not important.
In persuasion situations, you can do almost everything you need to do 90% with just a good anchor.
Yeah.
Right?
Okay. So let's hallucinate a bit.
Hallucinate. That sounds fun.
Yeah, do that. All right.
That's a good part of the seminar.